we highly recommend checking out Mindful Moments.
Absolutely.
It's like a personal pocket philosopher offering bite-sized insights from great thinkers delivered through the magic of AI narration.
It's a great resource.
It's perfect for those moments when you need a little mental nourishment on the go. All right, so picture this, ancient Greece. You're probably thinking crumbling columns, philosophers in togas, maybe a discus or two flying around.
Oh, absolutely. The classic imagery.
But what if I told you that all that vibrant energy, all those groundbreaking ideas, are still shaping our world today in ways you wouldn't even expect?
You know, it's so easy to think of ancient civilizations as just, well, ancient. Like something from a museum, totally disconnected from our lives.
That's exactly what we're going to challenge today. We're taking inspiration from Will Durant's The Life of Greece. But we're not doing a boring history lesson.
No textbook rehashing here.
Right. Instead, we're digging deep to uncover the DNA of today, hidden in plain sight back in the ancient world. We're going to see how some of their earliest innovations, their ways of life, even their fashion choices, laid the groundwork for stuff we still value today.
I love that, finding the DNA of today in the ancient world. And Durant is the perfect guide for this kind of exploration. He goes so far beyond just the dates and battles and really gets into the heart of what made Greek civilization tick, their character, their creativity, and ultimately their lasting influence.
Okay, so let's jump right in with something you might not expect to connect to ancient Greece, fashion.
Fashion, all right, color me intrigued.
So Durant spent some time talking about the Minoans. They flourished on the island of Crete, way before what we think of as classical Greece. And he mentions men wearing these short skirts, chests bare, soaking up the Mediterranean sun.
Sounds like they were ahead of the trend on that one.
Right. And then he talks about the women. They were rocking these elaborate hats, almost like something out of the early 1900s. Wild, right?
You know, that's what I love about these kinds of comparisons, these aesthetic similarities across thousands of years. It makes you wonder, are there fundamental things about human expression that just transcend time? Like some things just keep coming back around.
It's like we're all connected by these threads, these echoes of the past. And the thing is, this wasn't some primitive society just figuring things out. Durant really emphasizes how sophisticated the Minoans were. They had advanced urban planning, intricate plumbing systems, stuff you wouldn't expect from that era.
It definitely shatters this idea we sometimes have about history, you know, like it's this straight line of progress, things just get better and better, and that's clearly not the case.
It's way more complex than that. There are these bursts of innovation and creativity throughout history. And the Minoans, they were a shining example. Their palace centers, like Knossos.
Oh, Knossos.
Yeah, it wasn't just a royal residence. It was this hub of power, religion, commerce. It suggests a really organized society, a highly structured one.
Exactly. And when you think about it, the need for leadership, the use of symbols to show power, the way spiritual beliefs and secular authority intertwine, those are themes that pop up again and again throughout history. You see it in ancient Crete, and you see echoes of it in the nations we live in today.
And on that note, Durant talks about these powerful Minoan rulers who governed through military might, religious authority, and laws. He even points out their use of symbols like the double axe and the fleur-de-lis, symbols that they feel almost predictive of later European monarchies.
Wow, that's fascinating. It's like these fundamental ideas of governance, how to structure a society, they keep reappearing throughout history.
Right, and these patterns, these echoes of the past, they're everywhere once you start looking. Now, after the Minoans, Durant brings us to the Mycenaeans, a different culture that arose around 1600 to 1100 BC.
So we're shifting gears a bit here, moving to a new chapter in early Greek history.
Exactly. And the vibe is totally different. Durant paints a picture of a more war-oriented society, which makes sense because, well, this is the world Homer was writing about. Think epic battles, heroes, and the constant clash of swords.
This is the stuff of legends, the Iliad, the Odyssey. Those stories are rooted in the Mycenaean world.
Absolutely. And valor, strength in battle, that's what defined a man in this society. It was central to their whole identity.
Yeah. You know, what's interesting here is that this shift really shows you that Greek civilization wasn't static. It wasn't just one thing. It evolved over time, with different cultures emphasizing different values.
That's such a crucial point. It challenges this monolithic idea we sometimes have about ancient Greece. Like, oh, they were all philosophers and artists. But in reality, there was this whole spectrum of different societies with different priorities.
And that diversity is what makes it so fascinating to study. And it makes you think about our own modern world, right? How diverse it is, how many different cultures and values coexist.
It's like a microcosm of human history, all packed into one civilization.
Oh,
So after the Mycenaeans, we encounter Sparta, that legendary city-state with its incredibly strict and honestly kind of intense society.
oh yes, Sparta, the warrior society, famous for their discipline, their military prowess.
Exactly. And Durant dives into the figure of Lycurgus, this almost mythical lawgiver who's said to have reshaped Spartan society from the ground up. It's unclear how much of Lycurgus himself is legend versus reality, but the impact of his reforms, those are undeniable.
It's fascinating to think about this deliberate attempt to engineer a society, almost like a social experiment, designed to produce the ultimate warriors, the most dedicated citizens.
And they really achieved that, didn't they? Durant talks about the Spartan system, the redistribution of land, the way they discouraged trade, and the accumulation of wealth, their intense education system, the agoge. It was all designed to create this incredibly disciplined and resilient population.
The agoge, that's the one that really captures the imagination, right? Boys taken from their families at a young age, trained in the arts of war, pushed to their limits.
It's hard to even grasp how different that life must have been compared to what we experience today. But it shows the power of societal structures, how they can truly mold the character of individuals.
It makes you consider what are the trade-offs in any system. Sparta achieved remarkable military success and social stability, but it came at a cost. Individual freedoms were limited, intellectual pursuits were often sidelined, and their culture was much more closed off compared to other Greek city-states.
Durant points out that even their poetry served a very specific purpose. He mentions the poet Tyrtaeus, whose verses were all about inspiring young Spartan men to bravery, urging them to fight for their city-state.
So even their art was a tool to shape their citizens, which, again, makes you think about the role of art in our own society.
Okay.
How does it reflect our values, and how can it be used to influence us?
It's a question worth pondering. Now, in contrast to the militaristic Spartans, Durant takes us to the Ionian Islands around the 6th century BC. This was a period known as the Ionian Enlightenment. And these islands were buzzing with new ideas, different cultures, mixing and mingling. It was a real melting pot.
Ah, the Ionian Enlightenment. This is where things get really exciting intellectually. It's the birthplace of philosophy, of a new way of thinking about the world.
Absolutely. And Durant highlights Samos, ruled by Polycrates, as a center of innovation. He mentions this massive water tunnel they built, a marvel of engineering for the time.
It's a great example of how these city-states weren't just centers of trade and cultural exchange, but also hubs for technological advancement. They were pushing the boundaries of what was possible.
And out of this fertile ground, we get the first philosophers, the pre-Socratics, who started asking these fundamental questions about the universe. They were moving away from mythical explanations and towards reason and logic.
It was a revolution in thought. They wanted to understand the underlying principles of the cosmos, to find natural explanations for the phenomena they observed.
It's mind-blowing to think about, right? These people were laying the foundation for how we approach knowledge and understanding the world today. And of course, we can't forget about Pythagoras.
Pythagoras. The name everyone recognizes, but few understand the full scope of his influence.
Yeah, he was more than just a math whiz. His school was intense, with strict rules, communal living, even dietary restrictions.
Yeah.
It almost feels more like a spiritual order than just a school of thought.
Well, that's because Pythagoras was a philosopher and spiritual leader as much as he was a mathematician. His belief in the fundamental role of numbers went way beyond just math. It extended to music, to the cosmos. He even came up with this idea of the music of the spheres, this beautiful concept of a celestial harmony governed by mathematical relationships.
Right, and it wasn't just him. Durant introduces us to Xenophanes, who really shook things up by questioning the traditional Greek gods.
Yeah, Xenophanes was a real trailblazer. He pointed out how people tend to create gods in their own image. If lions could draw, he argued, they'd probably depict lion-like gods.
It's such a simple observation, but so profound. And it was crucial in opening up space for more abstract ideas about the divine, for philosophical interpretations that went beyond the literal.
He was challenging people to think beyond their limited perspective, to consider the possibility that their understanding of the divine might be flawed or incomplete, and that kind of questioning is essential for intellectual growth.
So from questioning the gods, we now journey to Athens, the birthplace of democracy.
Ah, Athens. The city-state that really captures the Western imagination. the cradle of democracy, the home of Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. It's iconic.
And Durant traces the evolution of Athenian democracy, how it developed over time, particularly through the reforms of Solon and Cleisthenes. This idea that citizens could have a direct say in their government, that was revolutionary.
Think about it. Before this, power was concentrated in the hands of a small elite, whether it was kings, aristocrats, or priests. And then Athens comes along and says, hey, what if we let the people decide?
And they did it. They created these institutions.
Yeah.
The Athenian Assembly, the Council, the popular courts. These were innovations in self-governance that, in many ways, laid the groundwork for our own systems of government today.
Of course, Athenian democracy wasn't perfect, and Durant doesn't shy away from that. It excluded women, slaves, and foreigners.
Right, it wasn't the universal suffrage we might think of today, but it was a huge step forward for its time. And it set in motion this idea that the power to govern ultimately rests with the people.
And it's crucial to acknowledge those limitations so we can have a clear-eyed view of history. We can celebrate the achievements while also understanding the injustices that were baked into these systems.
And speaking of Athenian democracy, we have to talk about Pericles. He was a pivotal figure in Athens' golden age.
Pericles, the statesman, the orator, the visionary leader, he really embodies that golden age.
He was born into an aristocratic family, but ended up leading the democratic movement. And under his leadership, Athens flourished culturally and artistically. This is when we get the Parthenon, the great tragic plays, the flourishing of philosophy.
Pericles was more than just a politician. He was a patron of the arts, a champion of intellectual inquiry. He understood that a thriving society needs more than just military might or economic success. It needs a vibrant cultural life.
You know, Durant makes this really interesting point about how Pericles' reforms, like paying citizens for jury duty, actually helped broaden political participation. It allowed people from all walks of life to take part in the democratic process.
It shows a real commitment to making democracy work, to ensuring that it wasn't just an idea, but a lived reality for as many Athenians as possible.
Now, in the midst of all this history, we start to see echoes of ancient Greece in some surprising places, like Durant talks about the Hippocratic Oath, which is still relevant to medicine today. This emphasis on ethical behavior, on putting the patient's well-being first, that's a legacy that continues to shape healthcare.
The Hippocratic Oath is a powerful example of how the Greeks applied reason and principles to practical fields. It's not just about treating illnesses, it's about doing so with integrity and compassion.
And speaking of principles, we can't forget about Greek philosophy. This is where Durant really shines. He takes us on a journey from the early thinkers all the way to the giants: Socrates, Plato, Aristotle.
These are minds that grappled with questions that are still relevant today. What is the nature of reality? How do we acquire knowledge? What is the good life? It's mind-blowing to think that these debates started thousands of years ago and are still ongoing.
It shows the power of these fundamental questions.
Right.
Like, they don't just go away with time. And Durant highlights how different philosophers took different approaches. We have Plato, the idealist, versus Aristotle, the more empirical observer. It's a tension that has run through Western thought ever since.
Right. It's that classic divide between prioritizing abstract ideas versus focusing on what we can observe in the real world. And it's not just a philosophical debate. It influences how we approach problem solving, how we conduct scientific inquiry, even how we make decisions in our daily lives.
And in his conclusion, Durant really brings it all together, painting this grand picture of the Greek heritage that has permeated so much of modern life. He talks about our alphabet, elements of our language, our literary forms, even the concept of democracy itself.
It's humbling to consider the extent of their intellectual contributions, and it makes you realize that studying history isn't just about looking back at the past, it's about understanding how the past continues to shape us today.
I mean, think about it. Archimedes, Hippocrates, their work laid the groundwork for huge advancements in science, math, and medicine. And, you know, if you're finding these historical connections intriguing, there's a YouTube channel I think you might enjoy. It's called Mindful Moments.
Mindful Moments. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah. They do these AI-powered audiobook analyses that really dive deep into classic texts, exploring all these fascinating ideas. Now, Durant doesn't shy away from acknowledging the flaws of Greek civilization. He talks about the wars, the institution of slavery, the limited role of women. It's not all sunshine and roses.
Right. We have to be honest about the injustices and the darker aspects of history. And I think that's what makes Durant's work so valuable. He presents a balanced perspective, recognizing both the brilliance and the imperfections of the Greeks.
Exactly. And ultimately, he emphasizes the lasting contributions they made to freedom, to reason, to beauty. It's about learning from both their successes and their failures.
It's a reminder that even the most brilliant civilizations have their blind spots, and studying their mistakes can be just as valuable as celebrating their achievements.
Okay, so after this whirlwind tour through just a glimpse of Durant's The Life of Greece, let's take a moment to really reflect. Imagine a civilization that valued intellectual rigor and physical beauty, democracy, and individual excellence, all at the same time. How can understanding their journey, their triumphs, and their struggles give us a deeper perspective on our own efforts to build a thriving society?
It's a powerful question to consider, and I think the answer lies in the enduring relevance of the questions the Greeks grappled with. The nature of justice, the ideal form of government, the pursuit of knowledge and virtue, these are all questions that we're still wrestling with today.
And studying history, engaging with those timeless debates, can help us navigate the challenges and opportunities of our own time. So, if this exploration of ancient Greece has sparked your curiosity, we encourage you to dive deeper. A link to purchase The Life of Greece is in the show notes. And don't forget to subscribe and share this episode with anyone who might be interested. We want to keep these conversations going.
Because ultimately, understanding where we come from can help us chart a better course for where we're going. The legacies of ancient Greece are all around us, and by exploring them, we can better understand ourselves and the world we live in.
So keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep those minds engaged. We'll see you next time for another deep dive into the ideas that shape our world.